During the middle of the concert, a voice rose from the audience so powerful and pure that Elvis Presley stopped mid-performance and looked around the venue, trying to see who had just delivered such an incredible rendition of his own song. When 12-year-old Lucy Thompson's voice filled the Memphis Coliseum that night, people thought Elvis was lip-syncing. But the voice wasn't coming from the stage, it was coming from row 15. When Elvis heard that little girl's voice, he experienced the same magic he had felt at the beginning of his own career. This wasn't just natural talent that a child could possess. This was one of the greatest discoveries in music history. Lucy's voice was cleaner, more emotional, and more powerful than Elvis's own. For the first time in his career, the king felt like he had met his match. And she was only 12 years old. Lucy Thompson lived with her parents in a small apartment on the outskirts of Memphis, where her father worked double shifts at the cotton mill and her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families across town. The Thompsons weren't poor exactly, but every dollar had to be counted, every expense carefully considered. There was no money for piano lessons, no funds for singing coaches, and certainly no extra cash for the kind of musical education that could nurture a child's talent. But Lucy had something that couldn't be bought or taught, a voice that seemed to come straight from heaven itself. From the time she could talk, she had been singing, not the off-key warbling that most children produce, but actual melodies with perfect pitch and an emotional depth that seemed impossible for someone so young. Her parents first noticed her gift when she was just 3 years old. Lucy had been sitting in front of their old radio, listening to a gospel program, when she began singing along with the choir. But she wasn't just mimicking the words. She was harmonizing, creating her own melody that somehow improved the entire song. Her mother, Martha, had been washing dishes in the kitchen when she heard what sounded like a professional singer coming from the living room. When Martha rushed in to see what was happening, she found her tiny daughter with her eyes closed, completely lost in the music, singing with a voice that made the hair on Martha's arms stand up. It was the kind of voice that people spent their entire lives trying to develop, and Lucy had been born with it. As Lucy grew older, her voice only became more remarkable. She learned songs not from sheet music. The family couldn't afford music lessons, but by listening to the radio, she would hear a song once and be able to sing it perfectly, often adding her own little flourishes that somehow made it better than the original. The neighbors would stop their conversations when Lucy practiced in the backyard, gathering quietly to listen to this phenomenon who lived right next door. By the time Lucy turned 12, word of her incredible voice had spread throughout their neighborhood. People would make excuses to visit the Thompson house, hoping to hear Lucy sing. Local church leaders begged her parents to let her join their choirs, promising that her voice would bring people to faith just by hearing it. But the Thompsons were humble people who didn't want their daughter to become a spectacle or to develop an ego about her gift. Lucy herself was remarkably unaware of just how special her voice was. To her, singing was as natural as breathing. She didn't understand why people reacted so strongly when she sang, why conversations stopped when she hummed while doing her homework, or why her teachers sometimes got tears in their eyes during school music class. Like most young people in Memphis in the 1970s, Lucy was completely captivated by Elvis Presley. She owned exactly 3 records, gifts from relatives who had scraped together enough money for birthdays and Christmas, and she had worn them nearly smooth from constant playing. Her favorites were Love Me Tender, Can't Help Falling in Love, and Amazing Grace. Though she loved every song Elvis had ever recorded, Lucy had taught herself to sing Elvis's songs by listening to them over and over again. But something magical happened when she sang them. While Elvis's versions were powerful and charismatic, Lucy's versions were somehow more pure, more emotionally direct. She didn't try to imitate Elvis's style, she simply sang the songs as she felt them, and the result was breathtaking. When the announcement came that Elvis would be performing at the Memphis Coliseum, Lucy begged her parents to find a way for the family to attend. She had never asked for anything so desperately, had never wanted anything as much as she wanted to see her idol perform live. The tickets were expensive, more than her father made in a week, but Lucy's parents could see how much it meant to her. Martha and James Thompson made sacrifices for months to save for those tickets. Martha took on extra cleaning jobs, working weekends and holidays. James picked up overtime shifts whenever they were available, coming home exhausted but determined to make his daughter's dream come true. They ate simple meals, postponed repairs to their old car, and put off buying new clothes, all so they could afford 3 tickets to see Elvis Presley. When they finally had enough money saved, James went to the ticket office with trembling hands, afraid that the show might already be sold out. But luck was on their side. There were still seats available, though not the best ones. They would be sitting in the middle section, row 15. Seats that would put them close enough to see Elvis clearly, but far enough away that he would never notice them. Lucy was so excited when her father came home with the tickets that she couldn't sleep for days. She practiced Elvis songs constantly, imagining what it would be like to hear them performed live by the king himself. She dreamed of the moment when thousands of people would be singing along to the same songs that had meant so much to her throughout her childhood. On the evening of the concert, Lucy put on her best dress, a simple blue outfit that her mother had sewn for special occasions, and the family made their way to the Memphis Coliseum. The building was already buzzing with excitement when they arrived, fans streaming in from all directions, many wearing Elvis-inspired clothing and carrying signs declaring their love for the king. Lucy held tightly to her parents' hands as they found their seats, overwhelmed by the size of the venue and the energy of the crowd. She had never been in a building so large, had never been surrounded by so many people who shared her passion for Elvis's music. The anticipation in the air was electric, and Lucy felt her heart racing with excitement. As they settled into their seats in row 15, Lucy looked around at the other fans, noting how many different ages and backgrounds were represented. There were teenagers who had grown up with Elvis's music, middle-aged couples who had been dancing to his songs for decades, and elderly people who remembered when he first burst onto the scene. Music, Lucy realized, had the power to bring together people who might never otherwise meet. When the lights dimmed and Elvis took the stage in his iconic white jumpsuit, the crowd erupted in cheers so loud that Lucy felt them in her chest. Even from their seats in the middle section, Elvis looked larger than life, moving with the confident grace of someone who had been born to perform. Lucy was mesmerized, watching every gesture, hanging on every note. Elvis opened with, "That's all right," and the crowd sang along enthusiastically. Lucy joined in, her voice blending with thousands of others. But even in that massive chorus, there was something different about the sound she was making. The people sitting near the Thompsons began to notice that one voice seemed to stand out from all the rest. As the concert continued, Elvis moved through his greatest hits, and with each song, more and more people in their section began to turn toward Lucy. Her voice was so clear, so powerful, and so perfectly pitched that it was impossible to ignore. She wasn't trying to show off or draw attention to herself. She was simply singing along with complete joy and abandon, lost in the music that had meant so much to her for so many years. When Elvis began the opening chords of "Love Me Tender," something magical happened. Lucy knew this song better than any other. She had been singing it since she was a small child, had made it her own through countless hours of practice. As Elvis sang the first verse, Lucy closed her eyes and began to sing along, her voice rising above the crowd with a clarity and emotion that was impossible to ignore. The effect was immediate and dramatic. People in their section stopped singing and started listening to Lucy instead. Her voice was so pure, so perfectly controlled, that it seemed to float above the crowd like something ethereal. The couple sitting directly in front of the Thompsons turned around completely, staring at Lucy in amazement as she continued to sing. But the most remarkable thing happened when Lucy reached the chorus. Her voice became so powerful, so emotionally rich, that it began to carry throughout the entire venue. People in sections far from row 15 began to look around, trying to figure out where this incredible voice was coming from. Some thought the sound system was malfunctioning. Others wondered if Elvis had somehow improved his own voice dramatically. On stage, Elvis himself began to notice that something unusual was happening. The audience seemed to be responding differently than usual, their attention divided between the stage and something else. He could hear another voice, a voice so beautiful and pure that it actually complemented his own singing rather than competing with it. For a moment, he thought one of his backup singers had joined him unexpectedly, but when he looked around, his usual musicians were in their normal positions. Then Elvis heard it clearly, a voice coming from the audience that was singing "Love Me Tender" with such perfection that it gave him chills. This wasn't just someone singing along. This was an artist delivering a performance that rivaled his own. Elvis had been performing for over 20 years, had heard thousands of singers, but he had never heard anything quite like this. As the song continued, Elvis found himself listening more than singing, trying to locate the source of this incredible voice. The sound seemed to be coming from somewhere in the middle section, but with the stage lights in his eyes and thousands of people in the darkness, he couldn't pinpoint exactly where. When "Love Me Tender" ended, Elvis did something he had never done before in his career. Instead of immediately launching into the next song, he set down his microphone and walked to the edge of the stage, raising his hand for quiet. The massive crowd gradually settled down, sensing that something unplanned and potentially historic was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said, his voice carrying clearly throughout the venue without amplification, "I need to stop for a moment because I just heard something incredible. Someone in this audience has a voice that just about knocked me off my feet." The crowd began to murmur with excitement, thousands of heads turning as people tried to figure out what Elvis was talking about. In row 15, Lucy felt her face burning with embarrassment as she realized that Elvis might be referring to her. "I've been singing for a long time," Elvis continued, "and I've heard a lot of talented people, but whoever just sang 'Love Me Tender' with me has one of the most beautiful voices I've ever heard in my life. I'm not exaggerating when I say that voice is better than mine." The audience erupted in surprised chatter. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was publicly acknowledging that someone in the crowd could sing better than he could. This was unprecedented, unimaginable, and absolutely electrifying. "I need to find out who that was," Elvis said, scanning the crowd, "because I have a feeling we're all about to witness something very special." Lucy's parents looked at their daughter in shock. They had always known she had a remarkable voice, but to hear Elvis Presley himself acknowledging her talent in front of thousands of people was beyond anything they could have imagined. Lucy herself was frozen, hardly able to believe that her idol was talking about her. The people sitting around the Thompsons began pointing toward Lucy, and gradually, more and more of the crowd began to turn their attention toward row 15. Elvis followed their gaze, and when he spotted the young girl sitting with her parents, he smiled broadly. "There you are," Elvis said, pointing directly at Lucy. "Young lady, would you mind standing up so everyone can see who has been blessing us with that incredible voice?" With thousands of eyes upon her, Lucy slowly stood up, her legs trembling with nervousness and excitement. The entire Memphis Coliseum fell silent as people got their first clear look at the 12-year-old girl who had just amazed one of the greatest performers in music history. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Elvis called out to her. "Lucy Thompson," she replied, her voice small but clear enough to carry throughout the venue. "Well, Lucy Thompson," Elvis said, "I want you to know that you have just given me one of the greatest compliments of my career by singing along with me. But I have a feeling that wasn't you singing along with me. I think I was singing along with you." The crowd laughed and applauded, charmed by Elvis's humility and amazed by this unexpected turn of events. "Lucy, I'm going to ask you to do something that might seem scary, but I promise you'll be safe," Elvis continued. "Would you be willing to come up here on stage with me? I'd like everyone to hear that beautiful voice of yours properly." Lucy looked at her parents, her eyes wide with disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Elvis Presley was inviting her to sing with him on stage in front of thousands of people. Her mother nodded encouragingly, tears already streaming down her face, while her father squeezed her hand supportively. "Yes," Lucy called out, her voice gaining strength. "Yes, I'd love to." The crowd erupted in cheers as security personnel made their way to row 15 to escort Lucy to the stage. As she walked down the aisle, thousands of people applauded and cheered for her, many of them as excited as if they were witnessing the discovery of the next great star. When Lucy reached the stage, Elvis was waiting for her with a warm smile and an outstretched hand. He helped her up the steps and led her to the center of the stage, where she found herself standing in front of more people than she had ever imagined possible. "Don't be nervous," Elvis whispered to her. Just sing the way you were singing in your seat. That's all you need to do. Elvis handed Lucy a microphone and turned to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to witness something very special tonight. This young lady is about to show you what real talent sounds like. Lucy, would you like to sing Love Me Tender with me again, so everyone can hear you properly this time? Lucy nodded, her nervousness beginning to fade as she felt the warmth and support of the crowd. When the band began the opening chords of Love Me Tender, she closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, just as she had done thousands of times while listening to her records at home. When she began to sing, the effect on the audience was immediate and profound. Her voice, now amplified through the sound system, filled every corner of the Memphis Coliseum with a purity and beauty that seemed almost supernatural. People in the audience began to cry, overwhelmed by the raw emotion and perfection of what they were hearing. Elvis joined in for the second verse, but instead of competing with Lucy's voice, he harmonized with it, creating a sound that neither of them could have achieved alone. The combination of his experienced showmanship and her natural gift created something magical, a musical moment that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. As they sang together, Lucy began to relax and enjoy the experience. She looked out at the sea of faces, all focused on her with expressions of wonder and appreciation, and she felt a surge of confidence that she had never experienced before. This was what she was meant to do. She realized this was her purpose. When the song ended, the crowd gave them a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. People were cheering, crying, and calling out words of encouragement to Lucy. Elvis put his arm around her shoulders and smiled broadly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into his microphone, "I think we've just witnessed the birth of a star." After the applause died down, Elvis knelt beside Lucy so they could speak more privately. "Lucy, I want to ask you something important," he said quietly. "Have you ever had any singing lessons? Any formal training?" "No, sir," Lucy replied. "We can't afford lessons. I just listen to records and sing along." Elvis shook his head in amazement. "That's incredible. What you just did up here, most people spend years trying to learn how to do that, and you're doing it naturally." He stood up and addressed the crowd again. "Folks, this young lady has never had a single singing lesson. Everything you just heard is pure, natural talent." The crowd responded with renewed amazement and applause. Elvis turned back to Lucy, and what he said next would change her life forever. "Lucy, I want to make you an offer, and I want your parents to hear this too." He gestured toward the Thompsons, who were watching from their seats with expressions of disbelief. "I would like to pay for Lucy to have the best vocal training available. I want to connect her with the finest voice coaches, the best music teachers, and give her every opportunity to develop this incredible gift she's been given." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Elvis held up his hand for quiet. "But more than that, I'd like Lucy to record a song with me, a real recording, in a professional studio that we can share with the world." Lucy felt her knees go weak. Elvis Presley wanted to record a song with her. The king of rock and roll was offering to be her mentor, her partner, her pathway to a career in music. "What do you say, Lucy?" Elvis asked. "Would you like to make some music together?" Through tears of joy, Lucy nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Mr. Presley. Yes, I would love that more than anything." 2 weeks later, Lucy found herself in Sun Studio, the legendary recording facility where Elvis himself had made his first recordings nearly 20 years earlier. The studio was smaller than she had expected, but the history that had been made within those walls was overwhelming. This was where rock and roll had been born, where countless musical legends had created their masterpieces. Elvis had arranged for Lucy to work with some of the most respected vocal coaches in Nashville, and in just 2 weeks of intensive training, her already remarkable voice had become even more polished and controlled. She learned proper breathing techniques, expanded her range, and developed even better control over her tone and dynamics. But perhaps more importantly, Lucy learned how to use the recording studio technology to capture the full beauty of her voice. Elvis spent hours with her, teaching her how to work with microphones, how to layer vocals, and how to create the kind of recordings that would showcase her talent to its fullest potential. For their duet, they chose a new song that had been written specifically for them, a beautiful ballad called "When Stars Align." that told the story of two voices finding perfect harmony. The song was crafted to highlight both Elvis's seasoned experience and Lucy's fresh, pure sound. The recording session was magical. Lucy's parents sat in the control room, watching their daughter work alongside one of the most famous people in the world, creating something beautiful that would be preserved forever. When they played back the first complete take, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. The song captured everything that had made their live performance so special. Elvis's warmth and charisma perfectly complementing Lucy's pure, emotional delivery. But it also showcased Lucy's individual talent, giving her solo moments that demonstrated just how extraordinary her voice really was. When Stars Align was released 6 months later, it became an immediate sensation. Radio stations across the country played it constantly, and music critics hailed it as one of the most beautiful duets ever recorded. But more than that, it introduced Lucy Thompson to the world as a new kind of musical talent. The song reached #1 on the charts within 3 weeks of its release, but its impact went far beyond commercial success. Music schools began using Lucy's vocals as examples of perfect technique. Other established artists requested the opportunity to work with her. Record companies offered her solo contracts that would have made her wealthy beyond her family's wildest dreams. But Lucy and her parents, with Elvis's guidance, made careful choices about her career. They turned down offers that would have exploited her youth or pushed her too hard too fast. Instead, they focused on her education, both academic and musical, ensuring that she would have a solid foundation for whatever path her life might take. Elvis became not just Lucy's musical mentor, but a trusted family friend. He ensured that she continued to receive the best vocal training available, but he also encouraged her to be a normal teenager. He understood the pressures of fame better than anyone, and he was determined to protect Lucy from the pitfalls that had affected his own life. Lucy continued to perform, but only occasionally and always in settings that felt comfortable and appropriate for someone her age. She sang at special events, recorded a few more songs, and gradually built a reputation as not just a talented young singer, but as a serious artist with something meaningful to contribute to music. As Lucy entered her teenage years, her voice continued to develop and mature. The pure, childlike quality that had first caught Elvis's attention evolved into something richer and more complex, but no less beautiful. She learned to sing different styles of music: gospel, country, rock, and even classical, demonstrating a versatility that amazed everyone who worked with her. More importantly, Lucy developed as a songwriter. The girl who had once learned songs only by listening to the radio began creating her own music, writing lyrics that reflected her experiences and melodies that showcased her unique vocal abilities. Elvis encouraged this creative development, often collaborating with her on new songs and helping her understand the business side of music. Lucy's success brought unexpected opportunities to her entire family. Her parents were able to move out of their small apartment and into a comfortable house, though they remained humble and grounded despite their daughter's fame. They insisted that Lucy continue her regular education alongside her musical training, ensuring that she would be prepared for any future she might choose. The music industry watched Lucy's development with great interest, but Elvis's protective influence kept the more predatory elements at bay. He had seen too many young talents destroyed by fame and exploitation, and he was determined that Lucy would have a different experience. By the time Lucy turned 16, she was already being mentioned in the same conversations as established stars, but she had managed to maintain the humility and genuine love of music that had first attracted Elvis's attention. She understood that her voice was a gift that came with responsibility, the responsibility to use it well and to inspire others through her music. Lucy's discovery and success had effects that reached far beyond her own career. Her story inspired countless other young people to pursue their musical dreams, showing them that talent could be recognized and nurtured regardless of economic circumstances. Music schools reported increased enrollment from students who had been inspired by Lucy's journey. More significantly, Lucy's success prompted changes in how the music industry approached young talent. Record companies began investing more in proper development and education for young artists, rather than simply exploiting their immediate commercial potential. Lucy's example showed that taking time to properly develop young talent could lead to more sustainable and meaningful careers. Elvis himself often spoke about how working with Lucy had reinvigorated his own love of music. At a time when he had been questioning his own artistic direction, discovering and mentoring Lucy reminded him of the pure joy that music could bring. Their collaboration led to some of the most critically acclaimed work of Elvis's later career. The Memphis Coliseum, where Lucy and Elvis first performed together, eventually installed a plaque commemorating that historic night. It became a popular destination for music fans who came to see the spot where a 12-year-old girl had stood up in the audience and changed the course of music history. But perhaps the most important impact of Lucy's story was the message it sent about the power of music to transform lives. Her journey from a poor child in Memphis to an internationally recognized artist proved that talent, when combined with hard work and proper support, could overcome any obstacle. As Lucy matured as both an artist and a person, she developed a philosophy about music and success that was heavily influenced by her relationship with Elvis. She understood that her voice was not just a gift to be treasured, but a tool to be used for positive impact in the world. Lucy began using her platform to support music education programs, particularly in communities where children might not otherwise have access to musical training. She established scholarships for young singers, funded instruments for school programs, and regularly performed at benefit concerts for musical charities. She also became an advocate for young artists, speaking out against exploitation and pushing for better protections for minors in the entertainment industry. Lucy had been fortunate to have Elvis as a mentor and protector, but she knew that many young talents weren't so lucky. In interviews, Lucy often credited Elvis not just for discovering her talent, but for teaching her how to use that talent responsibly. "He could have just put me on stage and made money from my voice," she would say. "Instead, he invested in my education, protected my childhood, and taught me that being an artist means serving something bigger than yourself." This philosophy guided all of Lucy's career decisions. She chose projects based on their artistic merit rather than their commercial potential. She collaborated with other artists not just because it might be profitable, but because she could learn from them or help them grow. She used her voice to address social issues and to bring comfort to people who needed it. 20 years after that magical night at the Memphis Coliseum, Lucy Thompson had become one of the most respected voices in music. She had released multiple platinum albums, won numerous awards, and earned critical acclaim for her artistic integrity and vocal excellence. But more importantly, she had remained true to the values that Elvis had taught her. Lucy's career had also opened doors for other young artists. The scholarship program she had established had helped hundreds of talented young people receive musical education they otherwise couldn't afford. Several of these scholarship recipients had gone on to successful careers of their own, creating a ripple effect of musical talent and opportunity. Elvis, who had continued to mentor Lucy throughout his life, often spoke with pride about her accomplishments. He would tell interviewers that discovering Lucy was one of the most important things he had ever done, not because of the success it brought him, but because of the joy it had brought to the world. When Elvis passed away, Lucy was among the speakers at his funeral, delivering a heartfelt tribute that brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. She sang "Love Me Tender," the song that had first brought them together, and her performance was so beautiful that it seemed like Elvis himself was there, harmonizing with her one last time. After Elvis's death, Lucy became even more committed to using her talent in ways that would honor his memory. She established the Elvis Presley Foundation for Young Artists, which provided not just financial support, but mentorship and guidance for emerging talents. The foundation ensured that future generations of young artists would have the kind of support and protection that Elvis had provided for Lucy. As Lucy entered her 30s, she found herself in a position similar to the one Elvis had been in when he discovered her. She was an established artist with the power to recognize and nurture new talent. And just as Elvis had done for her, Lucy began actively looking for young singers who might benefit from her guidance and support. One evening, while performing at a small venue in Nashville, Lucy heard a voice in the audience that stopped her mid-song. It was a young boy, no more than 10 years old, singing along with such purity and emotion that it reminded her instantly of her own experience that night in Memphis. After the show, Lucy sought out the boy and his family. His name was Michael, and like Lucy at his age, he came from a family that couldn't afford formal musical training, but recognized that their son had something special. Lucy saw herself in Michael's eyes, the same wonder, the same natural understanding of music, the same raw talent waiting to be developed. Without hesitation, Lucy offered to become Michael's mentor, just as Elvis had become hers. She arranged for his musical education, provided opportunities for him to perform and learn, and most importantly, gave him the guidance and protection he would need to navigate the music industry. As Lucy worked with Michael, she understood more deeply what Elvis had given her all those years ago. It wasn't just the career opportunities or the financial support. It was the knowledge that someone believed in her talent enough to invest in her future. It was the security of knowing that someone with experience would guide her through the challenges ahead. The cycle that had begun with Elvis's generosity toward Lucy was now continuing with Lucy's investment in Michael. And Lucy knew that someday, when Michael was established in his career, he would likely find himself in a similar position, able to discover and nurture the next generation of talent. The story of Lucy Thompson began with a moment of recognition. Elvis Presley hearing something special in a 12-year-old girl's voice and having the wisdom and generosity to act on that recognition. But it became much more than that. It became a story about the responsibility that comes with talent, the importance of mentorship, and the way that one act of kindness can create ripples that extend far beyond the original gesture. Lucy's journey from a poor child in Memphis to an internationally celebrated artist proved that talent, when properly nurtured and supported, knows no boundaries. Her success opened doors not just for herself, but for countless other young artists who benefited from the programs and opportunities she created. More importantly, Lucy's story demonstrated the power of using success responsibly. She could have simply enjoyed her fame and fortune, but instead, she chose to honor Elvis's legacy by giving back to the music community and supporting the next generation of artists. The Memphis Coliseum, where it all began, continued to host concerts and events, but that magical night when Elvis discovered Lucy remained its most famous moment. A new generation of music fans would visit the venue and learn about the evening when a 12-year-old girl stood up in the audience and changed music history. Elvis Presley's legacy was already secure when he discovered Lucy, but his decision to mentor her added another dimension to his story. He would be remembered not just as a great performer, but as someone who recognized greatness in others and had the generosity to nurture it. The song "When Stars Align" that he recorded with Lucy became one of his most beloved recordings, a testament to what could happen when established talent and emerging gift came together in harmony. Lucy Thompson's voice, which had first amazed people in that Memphis concert hall, continued to inspire and move audiences around the world. But perhaps her greatest achievement was not the awards she won or the records she sold, but the knowledge that she had used her gift to make the world a little more beautiful and to help other young artists find their own voices. The little girl who had once sat in row 15, singing along with her idol, had grown into an artist who understood that true success meant lifting others up along the way. And in continuing that cycle of recognition and mentorship, she ensured that the magic that had begun on that unforgettable night would continue for generations to come.